So let's dive into our agenda, which is starting with Local Law 33 of 2018, known as Building Energy Grades. So what is Local Law 33? As per the rules of the City of New York, Section 103-06, building owners of the covered buildings are required to report their annual energy and water use, also known as benchmarking. Benchmarking is a reporting of annual energy and water use through the Energy Star Portfolio Manager tool. Energy Star score generated by this tool is based on the assessment of the energy use of the building relative to the buildings of comparable size and use. Based on this score, a corresponding grade will be assigned to each covered building. Grades will be from A through D, grade F, or grade N. We will discuss more as we go through these slides. Local Law 33 also requires the energy efficiency grade and score to be displayed near each public entrance within 30 days after October 1st in a given year. According to the definition of covered buildings, per Department of Finance records, a single building on a lot that exceeds 25,000 gross square feet, or multiple buildings on a lot that together exceeds 100,000 gross square feet, or multiple buildings held in a condominium ownership with the same board of managers that together exceed 100,000 gross square feet, or a city building. Benchmarking is a comparison. Initially, Local Law 84 was limited to building that exceeds 50,000 gross square feet, which was later expanded to building exceeding 25,000 gross square feet through Local Law 133 of 2016. It is to note that a covered building cannot comply with Local Law 33 without compliance with benchmarking law, that is Local Law 133. Local Law 95 of 2019 translates the numerical energy efficiency score from 1 to 100 into a corresponding grade from A through D. Grade A corresponds to a score of 85 to 100. Grade B corresponds to the score of 70 to 84. Grade C corresponds to a score of 55 to 69. Grade D corresponds to the score of 0 to 54. Grade F is assigned to those buildings that did not submit required benchmarking information. Grade N is for buildings that are either exempt from benchmarking or not covered by the Energy Star program. Please note that N-grade buildings are not subject to the posting of the energy efficiency rating label near public entrance. Just to summarize on the two main steps to comply with Local Law 33, step 1 is to submit the benchmarking information through the Energy Star Portfolio Manager to the City of New York. Step 2 is completing the attestation for each building and print the building energy efficiency rating label from the DOB Now public portal prior posting it near each public entrance of the covered building. Building owners or owner's representative can access the Building Energy Efficiency Rating tab through the DOB Now public portal. There are no requirements to register the account or sign in. Building owners will be required to search for their property by BBL number, which is borrow, block, and lot. Building owners can select each covered building by building identification number or address. Then select the print icon to access the energy efficiency rating label. Please note that for facilities with multiple bins, printing and posting of each bin is required as the rating label will be unique for each bin. The building owner or their representative must complete the attestation before downloading the building energy efficiency rating label. Attestation is basically the certification that the building rating label will be posted near each public entrance as per the requirements of the law and the rule. No attestation record will automatically inform DOB that the label is not posted, and penalties are associated with not posting the label. Owners can download their building energy efficiency rating label as a PDF and print as many copies as necessary to display at all public entrances to the building. A confirmation email and instructions for display will be provided. To the right is a sample of what a building energy efficiency rating looks like. Some may call it building energy efficiency grade, some will call it building energy efficiency score, but we prefer to call it building energy efficiency rating label as per the law because it includes both the grade and the score. There are various resources available on our recently updated Department of Buildings benchmarking webpage. Besides that, we are also available via email or telephone. We have a dedicated customer service setup in the shape of the New York City Sustainability Help Center that are also available, who are also available through email and telephone. Moving on to Local Law 87 of 2009, Energy Audits and Retro Commissioning. Department of Buildings worked very closely with technical working group that was convened by New York City Mayor's Office of Sustainability to draft the rule amendments related to energy auditing and retro commissioning. 1 RCNY section 103-07. The primary purpose of introducing the changes were to replace the guidelines in the reference section with ANSI-approved standards for procedures required to perform energy audits and retro-commissioning. Restrict the approved agency qualifications and registration for the submission of energy efficiency reports, EER, to registered design professionals. Standardize testing protocols with functional performance testing, reformat testing criteria per base building system type, and clarify current facility requirements and sampling requirements. This rule revision took effect on August 4, 2019. However, the amendments made by Section 1, 2, and 4 through 9 took effect on January 1st, 2020. The energy audit and retro-commissioning industry had been largely unregulated, and products that are labeled as energy audits and retro-commissioning vary greatly in scope, rigor, and quality. ANSI standards are now available to the industry that are intended to bring some order to the chaos by establishing minimum performance levels, by establishing a level playing field for all service providers. Standards are written in some sort of a code enforceable language and does not leave much room for subjective interpretation. For energy audits, the commercial building guidelines are now replaced by the ASHRAE standard 211-2018, standard for commercial building energy audits. For retro-commissioning, there was no standard or guideline available at the time when the law got published. However, now, since the industry has evolved, we have incorporated within the rule amendment NEP standard S120-2016, that is technical retro-commissioning of existing buildings. This standard provides required processes, technical procedures, method, and documentation for a retro-commissioning project methodology to discover existing operating conditions and to improve the operation and function of existing building systems. Another update is that non-registered design professionals who had the requisite credentials were allowed to register with the department and submit an EER without a professional engineer or registered architect. That will no longer be the case under the rule amendment, as the energy efficiency reports must be submitted by a registered design professional. Non-RDPs currently registered may continue to submit reports until the expiration of their registration or December 31st, 2021, whichever occurs first. We also added few more retro-commissioning certifications by ASHRAE AABC NEB to the existing list of approved and allowed retro-commissioning certifications. There was a clarity needed for defining the current facility requirements that is addressed by the rule amendments. Current facility requirements are the present operational needs and requirements of the building that include temperature set points, steam operating pressure, domestic hot water delivery temperatures, ventilation rates, and lighting levels. Current facility requirement establishes the success criteria of the retro-commissioning exercise. It must be justified by acceptable references that includes IES, HMC, which is New York City Housing Maintenance Code, Building Code, ASHRAE Fundamental Handbooks, and ASHRAE HVAC Systems and Equipment Handbook. Rule amendment are very prescriptive in describing the current facility requirements. However, no two buildings are alike in New York City, and we expect a retro-commissioning agent to define the current facility requirements under the prescriptive requirements of the rule amendment. In case where there is deviation from these prescriptive requirements, retro-commissioning agent can justify within the energy efficiency report for through reasons why particular current facility requirements are not standard or deviating from the listed prescriptive requirements within the rule amendment. Current facility requirements covers indoor space temperatures, operating system pressure for low pressure steam heated buildings, domestic hot water storage and delivery temperatures, ventilation rates, lighting levels, rule amendments also now covers HVAC and service water equipment in detail by defining pre-testing verification of all major equipment and its sub-equipment and components. It goes deeper into the functional performance testing requirements, temperature and pressure set points and setback, sensor calibration, simultaneous heating and cooling, boiler tuning for optimal efficiency, manual override remediation, and leaks. In the previous version of the rule, these items were left open to the subject interpretation of the retro commissioning agents. However, explaining these in detail has helped not only the service providers but as well as the DOB enforcement protocols. To strengthen our enforcement, we would like to see the details presented within the energy efficiency report that gets submitted to the department. Pre-testing verification is a checklist prior to conducting the functional performance testing to ensure that the base building systems are ready for going into functional performance testing phase. Functional performance testing is performance verification of all major equipment and its sub-equipment and components. Functional performance testing includes, but is not limited to, all controls, actuation, automation, and sequencing functions that impact energy consumption of the major equipment, such as control sequence of operation economizer functions, staging and load distribution, automatic reset functions, and integrated system level testing. Complete functional performance test forms must be included in the retro commissioning report. The rule amendment also clarifies on the temperature and pressure set points and setbacks, simultaneous heating and cooling for all major equipment air handling units. It prescriptively lists all critical and monitoring sensors that are associated with major equipment and clarifies on the scope of work for Local Law 87. All critical sensors that are part of a control sequence and have direct control of major equipment located in the common area must be tested for proper calibration. There is a different sampling requirement for monitoring sensors. Acceptable range for combustion efficiency test results have been provided where manufacturer guidelines are not available. All exposed pipes that are 3 inches or greater in diameter, pipe fittings and associated valves located in the common areas, at least 20% of sub-equipment located, non-common owner areas, and at least 10% of such sub-equipment located in non-common tenant areas that contain steam or fluid outside the operating temperature range of 60 and 105 degrees must be thermally insulated in accordance with the New York City Energy Conservation Code in effect at the time of installation. High-pressure steam traps have now been included within the rule amendment. All high-pressure steam pressure traps operating above 15 psi must be tested using ultrasonic leak detection to verify proper operations or must be replaced. There is a one-pipe steam distribution one-pipe steam distribution test that is now listed within the requirements of the rule amendment. Retro commissioning agent must conduct the steam travel time test using temperature data loggers to satisfy the requirements and to ensure that the one pipe steam is being distributed in a balanced manner. For two-pipe steam distribution system, there are two scenarios that have been listed. The, in scenario A, if the retrocommissioning agent can demonstrate that the supply and main return piping surface temperatures for all two-pipe steam distribution systems that serve major equipment have a differential of 30 degrees Fahrenheit or more, then no need to conduct steam trap testing. However, if a 30 degrees differential cannot be proven, then the retrocommissioning agent has to demonstrate by testing steam traps that at least 20% of steam traps in the non-common owner areas and at least 10% of the steam traps in the non-common tenant areas that are served by the major equipment are properly operating and functioning. There is a provision that has been added to the rule amendment if the work required is so extensive that it would require more time than available to meet the compliance deadline. The condition may be corrected within 2 years of submitting the retrocommissioning report to the department and must be noted in the report. Documented verification must be submitted on a form provided by the department showing that the differential temperature between the main supply and main return piping surface is more than 30 degrees Fahrenheit. For any duration of the test specified in the differential temperature test described in the subparagraph A above, after replacement, repair, or rebuilding of the deficient steam traps. There is an exception that applies to both scenario A and B if the building owner can demonstrate that the steam traps have been replaced or tested and verified as functioning properly within 5 years the date of the EOR is submitted and supporting documentation that is acceptable to the department is provided, then testing of steam traps is not required. Another change within Local Law 87 is the introduction of Energy Audit Template Tool as developed by PNNL in collaboration with Department of Buildings and New York City Mayor's Office of Sustainability. Initially, we were using the traditional standard energy audit spreadsheets for reporting purpose, but now it's an online platform that is available. Energy auditor submits the information following various steps from building information to contact information and audit details, enter the data related to facility description, include information for utility data and benchmarking, complete the energy use breakdown and quality assurance components of the tool, provide information for energy saving opportunities, and then in the end, submit to the city. Once the energy audit template tool is submitted to the department, the user gets a confirmation email which is auto-generated. User is then required to forward this confirmation email along with the retrocommissioning tools that is still a spreadsheet tool that is required to be submitted to Local Law 87 at buildings.nyc.gov. One major change within the rule amendment is the requirements to submit deep energy retrofit plan analysis report/tool. DERPA is a free automated tool that recommends customized deep and energy retrofit paths. DERPA suggests a customized capital plan and sequencing based on reported age of useful life. Recommends 4 retrofit pathways with ranges of savings. That includes deep optimization, hydronic conversion, heat pumps for heating, plus wall insulation. It also categorizes various deep energy retrofits in terms of medium savings, lowest improvement, lowest cost, highest cost. For categories of greenhouse gas savings, improved occupant experience, capital cost, and operation and maintenance. The Department of Buildings Energy Audit and Retro-Commissioning webpage is an updated platform that is available to the public for more information. We regularly update our web pages, so it's always good for the public to keep following on what is being updated. Department of Building Sustainability Enforcement Unit is also available through LL87 questions at buildings.nyc.gov and through telephone. Again, just like Local Law 33, the New York City Sustainability Help Center is available for Local Law 87 as well. Now I would like Holly Savoya, who's the Director of Sustainability Enforcement Unit, to give us an update on Local Law 97 of 2019.
Good morning. I'm going to talk about Local Law 97 of 2019, Building Emissions, Adjustment Program, Application Process, and Preparing for Compliance. First, we'll go over the Building Emissions Overview and the Climate Mobilization Act and the Local Law 97 of 2019. Then we'll review the Adjustments Program, the types of adjustments, 320.8 for buildings that are 40% over, or 320.9 for not-for-profit hospitals and healthcare facilities. Then I'll take you through the adjustment filing process and preparing for compliance. The New York State Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act updated the carbon goal for New York State, requiring that the state eliminate 85% of its greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 and offset the remaining 15% through carbon neutrality. It had an equity and social justice component, which said that 35% of funding must go to disadvantaged communities. It also called for interim goals. 70% of the electricity was to come from renewables by 2030, with 100% carbon-free electricity by 2040. And it aspires to be truly economy-wide. In New York City, we have the Climate Mobilization Act. Among that was Local Laws 92 and 94, which requires that the roofs of certain buildings be covered in green roofs and/or solar PV systems. Local Law 95, which assigns a building energy efficiency grade, which you just heard Syed discuss. Local Law 96, which established a Sustainable Energy Loan Program, otherwise known as PACE. And Local Law 97, the commitment to achieve certain reductions in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, which we will be discussing here today. Local Law 97 builds on previous local laws, many of which we discussed today. Local Law 84, benchmarking of energy and water use. Local Law 87, energy audits and retro-commissioning of base building systems. And Local Law 88, upgrading of lighting systems and the installation of submeters. Local Law 97 of 2019 has a citywide goal of 40% greenhouse gas reduction by 2030 and 80% by 2050. For covered buildings, it's 40% greenhouse gas reduction by 2030. And for city operations, it's 40% greenhouse gas reduction by 2025 and 50% by 2030. And for NYCHA buildings, it's a goal of 40% by 2030 and 80% by 2050, in line with the citywide goals. Just to take you a little bit through the timeline for Local Law 97, in April of 2019, the law was passed and became effective in November of 2019. Shortly thereafter, the advisory board was formed, and we've been working with the advisory board since that time. By the beginning of next year, a carbon trading study will be compiled, and in the middle of 2021, we will have an adjustments application process where the applications will be due. For high building emissions, they will be due on June 30th, and for not-for-profit healthcare systems, they will be due by July 21st of next year. And then by the beginning of 2023, the advisory board will have compiled their report for the council, and we will be setting, in that report will be set emissions limits and GHG coefficients. And then starting in January of 2024, it'll be go time. Compliance will begin. And the first report for the annual greenhouse gas emissions will be due on May 1st of 2025. But then in 2030, those emissions limits will then again be reduced. Article 320, Building Energy and Emissions Limits. Within Article 320, we have definitions, information about the advisory board, building emissions limits, assistance, outreach and education, and penalties. Let's go to the definition. For Local Law 97, the definition within 320.1 is, for a covered building, is a building that exceeds 25,000 gross square feet, or two or more buildings on the same tax lot that together exceed 50,000 gross square feet, or two or more buildings held in the condominium form of ownership that are governed by the same board of managers and that together exceed 50,000 gross square feet. And there are exceptions. There are industrial exceptions for electricity and steam generation, low-rise residential, independent, and under 25,000 gross square foot buildings, city buildings, NYCHA, and then rent regulated, which is also a defined term, religious houses of worship, low-rise residential, independent, and those under 25,000 gross square feet. Also, Article 11 Housing Development Fund properties and federal housing projects. What we're looking at here is a breakdown of the buildings for Article 320. So what you can see in the first pictorial is that 1 to 4 families represent 82% of the number of buildings in New York City. But when you look at the area that these buildings comprise, most of that is due to multifamily buildings. And then when you take a deeper look at the GHG emissions, you can see that it's equally split between both the multifamily and commercial properties. The advisory board is comprised of 19 members. There's a chairperson from DOB, a city council speaker representative, a mayor's office representative, and 8 appointees, each by the mayor and the city council speaker. The advisory boards are convened periodically, late last year, and then the next in January of 2029 and in January of 2039. And they're responsible for advising and providing recommendations for reducing greenhouse gas from buildings. And that will comprise the report that is due on January 1st of 2023. The advisory board composition from the mayor's office included an architect, an operating engineer, a building owner and manager, a public utility industry representative, and a representative from an environmental justice organization, the business sector, a residential tenant, and an environmental advocacy organization. From the City Council side, the nominees were an architect, a stationary engineer, a representative of the construction trades, a representative of the green energy industry, the environmental justice organization, a not-for-profit organization, residential tenant representatives, and a representative from an environmental advocacy organization. So the advisory board may convene working groups that consist of subject matter experts to help them to come to some conclusions and debate items that will need to be part of the questions that are answered for the report that's due in 2023. And those working groups can include individuals that are outside the advisory board. The working groups can take up they're to take up the elements of the law, and they shall convene a working group on hospitals. The hospitals working group is the only working group that is specifically called out within the law. However, the need for more became evident, and so there were a number of working groups that were established. Hospitals, building technologies and pathways, including both for multifamily and commercial, carbon accounting, energy grid, economic impact, communications, and implementation. The law calls out that the advisory board report must include a reference guide to delineate the responsibilities of the building designer and owners, estimated emissions reductions associated with any recommended energy performance requirements, economic impact, including benefits of achieving the energy and emissions performance requirements, and methods for achieving emissions reductions from manufacturing and additional processes. .3 deals with building emissions limits. The annual building emissions limits are set for 2024 through 2029 and 2030 through 2034. However, the advisory board will need to come up with values for 2035 through 39, 2040 through 49, and 2050 and beyond. And that will need to be in place by January 1st, 2023. It's to be established by the commissioner, and it must have an aggregate equivalence of 0.0014 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per gross square foot. The 2030-2034 target aligns with the city's 40 by 30 goal. The pictorial that you see in front of you shows you the green for the green building emissions limits for different use categories for 2024 through 2029. It also shows you those emissions limits for 2030 through 2034. And as you can see, they are ratcheted back significantly. The GHG coefficients are set for 2024 through 2029, but there are no values yet set for 2030 through 2034. And those will be set by January 1st of 2023. It is noted that the GHG coefficients can be calculated based on at the owner's option on time of use. And there will also be rules governing the calculation of greenhouse gas emissions for campus-style electric systems that share on-site generation. There are building emissions limits deductions for renewable energy credits, greenhouse gas offsets, and clean distributed energy resources. There's also a section on reporting, which needs to be certified by a registered design professional. There's a section on continuing requirements and extension for income restricted housing. There's also verbiage on change in building status. Penalties. The penalty for exceeding the greenhouse gas limit is a civil penalty of up to 268 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. For failure to report, there's a civil penalty of 50 cents per gross square foot per month. And for false statements, it's a misdemeanor with a fine up to $500,000 and prison up to 30 days. So we hope not to see any of those. Article 321 outlines definitions, required ECMs for certain buildings, and reports. For Article 321, the term covered building means, as it appears in the Department of Records for the Department of Finance, a rent regulated, which is a defined term, a religious house of worship, Article 11 Housing Development Fund properties, or federal housing projects. And these buildings should exceed 25,000 gross square feet, or 2 or more buildings on the same tax slab that together exceed 50,000 gross square feet, or 2 or more buildings being held in the condominium form of ownership that are governed by the same board of managers and that together exceed 50,000 gross square feet. For these buildings, they must meet the greenhouse gas limit for Section 28, Article 320.3.2, the limits for 2030 through 2034. And that must be certified by an RDP. Or they can employ prescriptive energy conservation measures, and those measures must be implemented by December 31st of 2024. And that report has to be prepared and certified by a retro commissioning agent. So what are those prescriptive measures? They include adjusting temperature set points for heat and hot water, repairing all heating system leaks, maintaining heating systems, installing individual temperature controls or insulated radiator enclosures with temperature controls on all radiators, insulating all pipes for heating and or hot water, insulating steam system condensate tank or water tanks, installing indoor and outdoor heating system sensors and boiler controls, replacing or repairing all steam traps, installing or upgrading steam system master venting, upgrading lighting, weatherizing and air sealing, installing timers on exhaust fans, and installing radiant barriers behind all radiators. Okay, so that concludes the overview. We'll now move on to the adjustment program. An adjustment is not an exemption. The adjustment temporarily raises the building emissions limit. The adjusted limits are based on calendar year 2018 energy usage with a set reduction amount. The Assistance for Efficient Buildings with Special Circumstances recognizes that there are real challenges for certain buildings, and so there is a mechanism to assist qualifying buildings to reach that compliance. 28-320.7 is an adjustment to applicable annual building emissions, and those applications are for a date to be determined, and more information will be forthcoming. 320.8 deals with adjustments to applicable annual building emissions limits for the calendar years 2024 through 2029 for excessive usage buildings, and those applications are due before July 1st, 2021 by an RDP. And 320.9 are the adjustments for not-for-profit health hospitals and healthcare facilities. And those applications are due by July 21st of 2021 and must be submitted by a registered design professional. All of the adjustment applications will be submitted through DOB Now. For 320.8, the adjustment to applicable annual building emissions for calendar years 2024 through 2029, 2018 emissions must have been more than 40% above the 2024 emissions limits. They must have special circumstances where all excess emissions are attributable to that special circumstance. What are those special circumstances? They could be things like 24-hour operations, operations critical to human health and safety, high-density occupancy, energy-intensive communications technologies or operations, and energy-intensive industrial processes. They must have a 2014 Energy Code equivalent or performance equivalent to a 2014 Energy Code compliant building. There must be a plan to reduce greenhouse gas to meet the 2030 emissions limits. That would include a schedule of alterations in operations and management changes. And the certificate of occupancy must remain unchanged after December 31st, 2018. The adjusted limit for those buildings would be 70% of the calendar year 2018 emissions. So saving 30% emissions avoids penalties. And an extension may be possible for calendar years 2030 through 2035. So who are these buildings? If you look at this pictorial, the buildings at the bottom are those that we have records for 2018. And the blue line is the 2024 emissions limit. So as you can see, there are some buildings that pop up over the 2024 limit. And the orange line is 40% over that limit. So all of those buildings where you see popping up over the orange line would be those buildings that might possibly fall into 320.8. 320.9 is the adjustment to applicable annual building emissions limits for not-for-profit hospitals and healthcare systems. These buildings must have been classified as such as of November 15, 2019. They must be a not-for-profit hospital, a not-for-profit health center, or a not-for-profit health insurance plan center. And those adjusted limits for 2024 through 2029 would be 85% of calendar year 2018 emissions. And for 2030 through 2034, it would be 70% of calendar year 2018 emissions. Let's turn now to the adjustments application process. In DOB Now, those buildings that fall under 320.8 would be due June 30th of 2021. And those that fall under 320.9 would be due by July 21st of 2021. The required application inputs will really depend upon the application, but they can include things like building areas by occupancy group, calendar year 2018 energy use by energy source, for example, benchmarking data, 2014 energy code equivalency, greenhouse gas reduction strategies, energy use breakdowns, and not-for-profit status. The required documents, supporting documentation would be, or reports would be based upon the application as well. But you will have help. Local Law 97 adjustment application will have a filing guide to assist the applicant, and it will give them information that they can use to complete the application. Step by step, it will show you how to complete each DOB Now section and what the required information for each of those sections would be. There will also be references in the form of guidelines to prepare and submit documents and guidelines to determine what information will be necessary. And of course, there is additional information always at our GHG building emissions website. And now let's go to preparing for compliance. What you want to do when you're preparing for compliance is you want to determine the applicability and your compliance path. So, are you a covered building? And do you fall under Article 320? Do you fall under Article 321? Or do you fall under other articles? Are you a NYCHA building, a DCAS building, or a city building? For Article 320 buildings, you will want to work with a registered design professional to calculate emissions and limits for 2024 through 2029. For Article 321 buildings, you will want to work with an RDP to calculate emissions and limits for 2030 through 2034, and or work with a retrocommissioning agent to review the list of prospective energy conservation measures that would need to be implemented. So you want to be thinking ahead. The first thing that you should do is conduct an energy audit. For those buildings that have already gone through Local Law 87, you may have that energy audit information available to you. And as discussed earlier in this presentation, you can take advantage of the DERPA tool to determine some pathways that you could use to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. While doing this, you want to take an analysis of the energy use of the building or buildings to determine what the greenhouse gas emissions are. Then you want to determine what your building emissions limit will be. To plan for future compliance, we took a look at the properties that will comply with the limits in 2024 through 2029. And it is estimated that 75 to 80% of properties will comply. However, when the stricter limits go into place in 2030 through 2034, that number drops to an estimated 25 to 30% of properties that will comply. So it goes without saying, the sooner that you prepare, the better position you will be in. So what can you do to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions? First, improve energy efficiency, reduce carbon intensity, and look at the use of renewable energy credits, GHG offsets, clean distributed energy resources, and carbon trading options. To prepare for filing, you can work with a registered design professional because the applications must be certified by an RDP. The building area must be broken down by occupancy group. Conduct an energy audit. Do an analysis of the energy use of the building to determine the greenhouse gas emissions. Then determine the building emissions limit. You may wish to use an energy model to support the GHG reductions and the energy code equivalency. Make sure that you validate the analysis against the 2018 actual energy usage. And then develop a list of energy and emissions reduction strategies. Assess your eligibility for adjustment. Do you belong to Article 320.8, buildings with excessive emissions? Are your 2018 emissions greater than 40% over the 2024 limit? Is there a special circumstance present in the building? Are all excess emissions due to that special circumstance? Are greenhouse gas emissions equivalent to a 2014 Energy Code compliant building? Will it be? Has your certificate of occupancy been amended since December 31st of 2018, or will it be? Then assess if you can also assess if you are part of the not-for-profit hospital or healthcare facility group, Article 320.9. Was the building classified as a not-for-profit hospital healthcare center or health insurance plan center on November 15, 2019? Has it been since? Will it be in the future? Do you have documentation available that confirms your not-for-profit status? These are the kind of things you would want to look at. To prepare for filing, you want to look at your benchmarking data if available. If not available, you may have to recreate it from bills from 2018. Use that data to establish your actual building emissions. Take a look at your metering configuration and clearly determine how it is configured for the building. Perform an energy use breakdown by end use. Make sure that you have your bills and your records available from 2018 as your supporting documents. References are available. We talked about the Local Law 97 Adjustment Application Filing Guide. You can always consult the GHG Building Emissions website, or you can contact the New York City Sustainability Enforcement Unit at ghgemissions@buildings.nyc.gov. At this time, we will turn it over to some questions. Please submit your questions in the chat box and we will continue to answer them as they come in. Thank you for attending and we appreciate your participation.